Hey guys, Mike Sullivan here from FullPreterism.com. Tonight, me and Don Preston were supposed to do a video in response to Sam Frost and Jeremiah Nortier's videos trying to refute full preterism. Don has some technical issues that he's trying to get settled. He's moving into his new office and he's getting his Wi-Fi and all that stuff figured out. So we're going to try and do that tomorrow night. But I was just going to go ahead. I had a few notes here. I was just going to kind of do an informal refutation of their second video myself. And then we'll do it together tomorrow night, Lord willing. And he's still a little bit sick. He's got COVID, so hope he gets better soon. So the second video, before I get into the second video, let's talk about what was not covered in the second video as it pertains to some of the material that they've been producing previous to this. What was not covered in the first video or this one is any kind of refutation on New Testament imminence, or what theologians would call the big three: Matthew 10, 17 through 23, Matthew 16, 27, 28, the Olivet Discourse. And then how do you understand these comings of the Lord as we move into the New Testament? If they're predicting him coming in judgment in Jesus' generation and in the lifetime of the disciples, then all the eminence in the New Testament also would point in that direction. So Sam has told us that all full preterism has is the time text. That's it. That's the foundation. They don't have anything else. Well, if that's all we have, then I would expect a refutation of it. And we just aren't getting it. And of course, Jeremiah doesn't know what he believes, apparently. In one debate with a Catholic, he said that he believed that the book of Revelation was written before AD 70. If you hold to that view, then you have to take the judgment of the city in Revelation chapter 11 and the measuring of the temple and so forth as referring to the destruction of the temple and the city in AD 70, but he connects that 3.5 years judgment with the judgment of the dead, which again Daniel does in Daniel chapter 12, verses 2 through 7. Again, not much coverage on that, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So, no real details on imminence or the coming of the Lord. So I'm just going to throw some things out there and hope and pray that maybe they'll actually try a real defense or a real refutation of our position and what their defense is of these passages. First, let's talk about Old Testament imminence. They don't want to deal with New Testament imminence, so they wouldn't even start with Old Testament imminence. They're not allowing the Bible to interpret itself at all. So when we go to the Old Testament, for example, Ezekiel 7, verses 7 through 9, it reads this: "The time has come, the day is near. I will soon pour out my wrath. Then you will know that I am the Lord who strikes." We'll keep going. Ezekiel 12, 22. "Tell them, therefore, thus says the Lord, I will put an end to this proverb." They were saying that the day of the Lord isn't really going to be near in our lifetime. It's going to happen, to our descendants, kind of far off from us. That's the proverb that he's talking about. He says he's going to put an end to this. "And they shall no more use it as a proverb in Israel, but say to them, the days are near and the fulfillment of every vision." Does near here just mean that God is with us always? No, it doesn't. Matthew Poole says this of these passages in Ezekiel: "The days are at hand." See Ezekiel 12, 22, which we read. "They drew near indeed, when within some 3 years Jerusalem shall see the enemy besieging it, and feel his sword cutting down her chosen men. All that which the vision contains shall, ere few years are over, clearly appeared accomplished according to what my prophets foretold." Matthew Poole's commentary, you can get that online. But we go more. In Ezekiel 30, verse 3, For the day is near. The day of the Lord is near. And again, Matthew Poole talks about this being fulfilled within 2 years. 2 years. Through Nebuchadnezzar. So Ezekiel 7, Ezekiel 12, Ezekiel 30, it was the false prophets that were twisting the meaning of these words to mean something not truly imminent, not truly chronologically imminent. Remember, we heard in the very first video that imminence doesn't necessarily have to be chronological. Even, and Jeremiah said, oh, that's wonderful. Well, he doesn't know what he believes. He doesn't know if he's a partial preterist. He doesn't know anything. So I wouldn't want to be on the side of the false prophets twisting the meaning of these words, and yet Sam feels very comfortable to do that. And I don't care how many amillennialists he finds to twist these time texts. It's not going to, save him in the long run. It's the authority of Scripture that we need to go to. Obadiah 1:15. For the day of the Lord is near upon all nations. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Once again, Matthew Poole. I could pull up all kinds of commentaries that agree that the nearness here are all fulfilled within the lifetime of the prophets and their contemporaries. That's what these imminent terms mean. He says, for the day of the Lord of just revenge from the Lord upon this cruelty of Edom, the time which the Lord hath appointed for the punishing of this and other nations is near upon all the heathen, which God had given to Nebuchadnezzar, and which by this man's arm God would punish, as Jeremiah 27, 2-7. And that day may justly be accounted near, which shall come within the compass of one man's life. And then he goes down and he says, it shall be done by thine enemies to thee, as Obadiah 1:7. And this came to pass on Edom within 5 years after Jerusalem was sacked and ruined, with which space of time Obadiah prophesied, reproving Edom and threatening him for what he had done against Jerusalem and its inhabitants. 5 years. Near is literal chronological nearness. Let the Bible interpret itself. But Sam doesn't want to do that in the New Testament because he knows the domino effect. He knows when you connect the dots. That's why he calls partial preterism hyper-partial preterism. All right? And that's why he said, he was emphatic in the second video, I do not believe, I reject that Christ came from heaven in AD 70 in any way. He knows what's going to happen when he begins to do that. That's why he's running as fast as he can in the other direction. Just like Jonah. All right? He's out of there. And Jeremiah really doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do with New Testament imminence. Anyway, Zephaniah 1:7. For the day of the Lord is near. This just means God's always near them, comforting them, right? No. This is a judgment that would be, commentaries are different on this. It's fulfilled anywhere between 10 to 40 years. All right. The longest I've seen is 50 years, but most of them would be somewhere between 10 to 40 years. So again, literal nearness. But we don't want to talk about the Old Testament and how God used these words when it came to the day of the Lord and judgments. That's just really, really weak. So we had his interpretation of one coming of the Son of Man passage, and that was Matthew 10, verses 17 through 23. Now, we've challenged him on that, and Jeremiah was just kind of wimpy and didn't even ask him, like, well, what's your response to their response? And Jeremiah won't even give us his interpretation of this passage, all right? So this is what it says. Beware of men, For they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and kings for my sake, to bear witness before them and the Gentiles. This all happened in the book of Acts. When they deliver you over, do not be anxious how you will speak or what to say. For what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speaks, but the Holy Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brothers will deliver brothers over to death, and the father his child, and the children will rise against parents and have them put to death. And you will be hated for my name's sake. For the one who endures till the end will be saved. What end is that? It's the end in Daniel, the end of the age, in the Old Covenant age. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Again, clear reference to Daniel. All right? So, Sam says, well, this is the ascension. Okay, if this is the ascension, then who of the disciples that he's talking to here were brought before synagogues, were flogged, brought before governors and kings? Which of them were persecuted and killed before the ascension? Now, I'm not the only one challenging him with that. If you read D.A. Carson on this, he says all these events took place in the book of Acts before Christ coming in judgment in AD 70. Now, Sam knows he can't take that because there's a domino effect that takes place. And so he's not even going to go there. But he's not answering our challenge, and he's not answering Carson's challenge either. So all of these events were fulfilled within a generation before Christ came upon the clouds in judgment to end the Old Covenant age. And those who persevered until the end of the Old Covenant age were saved and delivered. All right? Easy enough. So Sam hasn't dealt with our challenge on that passage. He hasn't dealt with Matthew 16, 27, 28. For the Son of Man is about to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and he shall reward each person. There's that all, I guess, huh? All men at the last day. Verily I say unto you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death. All right? Till you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And in Mark 9:1, the Greek is a little different there. He says, when you see this, as it has already happened, you'll know that I came in power and the kingdom is present. All right? So, and then Matthew 24, what's the coming of the Son of Man here? Boy, these guys don't want to get in the Olivet Discourse at all. And yet they're trying to refute full preterism. This is one of the worst responses to full preterism that I have ever seen. And it's gone for 4 hours so far. Or I think it's over 4 hours at this point. 2 videos of over 4 hours. Sam, I think now is finally taking the Matthew 24:30, the Son of Man coming in glory and power with angels there, as the second coming event. I think Roderick Edwards one time was trying to say that was the ascension. But anyway, whenever I would make all these parallels between Matthew 24 and 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5, I remember Sam, after he left full preterism, him and Jason just said, you guys can't make those parallels between Matthew 24, 30, and 31 with 1 Thessalonians. That's dispensational. And now, of course, he's an amillennialist, and he's calling partial preterist dispensational if you believe the tribulation is an actual event and so forth, or that these coming of the Lord, they're one event. So these guys are all over the place. But anyway, I guess Sam is now saying that is the second coming event. Great. Well, Jesus says it was going to take place in his generation. You can't cherry pick that. He says all these things. He doesn't say some of these things. And of course, that accounts for New Testament imminence on the second coming and throughout the book of Revelation, which Jeremiah says was fulfilled or was written before AD 70. So just, they're missing so much here. So much. They're not even touching. Sam tried to deal with one Greek word on imminence, and that was engus, all right, near. And he stuck with one meaning that he thinks he found, and just a couple of Old Testament texts, and that's how he's trying to interpret every Greek word in the New Testament on imminence, I think. But we don't really know for sure because Sam isn't really covering the issues that Sam knows he's supposed to be covering. And Jeremiah is not holding his feet to the fire in that regard, for obvious reasons. All right, so enough of what kind of wasn't addressed in the second video. Let's go over some of the things that were addressed. So we got into the definition of cult. Is full preterism a cult? We have some backpedaling here. We have some moving of the goalpost. Before we were just a cult. Now the definition of cult is we're cult-ish because, here it comes, because we don't believe the traditions and historic orthodoxy of the church on the second coming, the resurrection, and so forth. So that is what, why we're a cult, because we're not historically orthodox. According to this definition, and get this right, according to this definition, Jeremiah Nortier's view of forensic justification classifies him as a cult. Martin Luther was a cult leader, according to the Roman Catholic Church. And Jeremiah and Sam, if you even hold a forensic justification with all your little colors and your, your big crosses. I was waiting for someone to start throwing holy water out there with that weird hat. And anyway, I'm just cracked me up sometimes. I'm sorry. But anyway, according to this definition, Luther and the entire Reformation is a cult. I'm still waiting for Jeremiah to show us, prior to Luther, give us all the names of all the early church fathers that was teaching Luther's view, and Jeremiah, your view of forensic justification. Still waiting for it. We have that challenge in our first book and the second edition of House Divided. I'm not looking for bits and pieces of a quote from someone who will later tie in sanctification to justification or the sacraments with justification. I'm looking for the pure, your version of forensic justification by faith alone. I want it. I haven't seen it. If you can't provide it, then according to your own definition of what a cult is, you're in a cult. Not to mention Reformed Baptist. I used to be a Reformed Baptist. I know firsthand how they have abused elder authority in those churches. I know they've split. Chantry has written about it. John MacArthur has talked about the whole shepherding movement and all of that. So if you really want to get into cults and your accountability partners and all the censorship and all the stuff that you go through, we can also look at Reformed Baptist as a cult. Or cult-ish. How do you like that? Okay, speaking about the ishes and the neos and all that stuff, let's get into the whole Gnostic charge, right? Now, I did say in the previous video, I did tell Don that you guys were neo-Gnostic, Gnostic-like. It's still the scare tactic. It's, I don't care what you put before Gnostic or after it. It's still a scare tactic. Well, let's see here. Sam, I brought up Tom Holland. All right, Tom Holland in Romans takes, the body of sin, the body of death, the body of flesh, and he talks about that, and he talks about it being a corporate body, or it being a sinful mode of existence, not necessarily this. Now, I said very clearly, and I asked Don, I said, Don, is Tom Holland Holland moving in the direction or going Gnostic? All right. Now, Sam knows, and this was blatant misrepresentation. All right. Sam knows that I have said forever, and I got it here in my book. All right. Armageddon Deception. I say this. Holland has, okay. However, theologians such as Tom Holland are developing a proper cultural context in which Paul is writing with a Hebraic mindset or within a worldview that is rooted in the Old Testament scriptures, which sees the body more in a corporate sense and context. Holland does a great job developing this in Romans 5 through 7. Now listen, and listen Sam, and listen Jeremiah, and 1 Corinthians 1 through 12. But we find him inconsistent and dropping the ball in Romans 8 and 1 Corinthians 15. In other words, Tom Holland is developing the corporate body and this body of sin and death and so forth, and he's doing a great job correcting kind of the common view that it's talking about this, right? But once it gets into Romans 8 and 1 Corinthians 15, he drops the whole corporate body view, okay? So Sam reads from Holland in Romans chapter 8, and he says, well, see, look, this just proves, and you can't quote anyone that's not a full preterist. Well, that's kind of news to me. I've never heard of that in the argument of debate and persuasion, that you cannot quote your opponent's admissions. I didn't say that the guy was a full preterist. I didn't say that he didn't believe in a future physical bodily resurrection. So Sam just is kind of off in la la land. I mean, I know he has Asperger's and he's got all kinds of issues going on, but I don't, he knows that I say Holland is inconsistent. And so, he thinks he made a big point. He did not. Yeah, this whole cherry picking, that was kind of, and I just addressed it, but it was like, so you're saying I can't quote Gary DeMar or James Jordan saying that the gathering of the elect in Matthew 24:31 is referring to Old Testament dead saints and New Testament dead ones being raised out of Hades into God's presence, inheriting eternal life? I can't use that admission. I can't quote them because they might believe in a future. That's kind of weird. I can't read the Reformation Study Bible on Matthew 24:31, where it says the coming of the Lord there and the gathering of the elect is parallel to 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5. I can't say that these views form my view. That's crazy talk. They don't even believe this. How can anyone serious about debate and persuasion? I mean, if I was talking to some kid or something, or someone that was born yesterday, maybe someone might say that, but these are guys that want to be apologists. Of course they know you can use the admissions, points of agreement that you have with your opponents to use against them. Jeremiah did this in his debate with a Roman Catholic. I think it was over Mary. And he talked about the differences of the popes and, and using that. I mean, so come on, man. I mean, get real. I mean, all this does is prove that you guys are dishonest, manipulative, and to be honest, a little, I don't want to, just not thinking. Let's put it that way. That was just bizarre. And I know they want to do that because the power of it. Because Jeremiah keeps saying, oh, this is Church of Christ, this is Church of Christ. He brings up Church of Christ so much, right? Because his audience is reformed. So he hates my testimony. My testimony is that I was Sovereign Grace. I was reformed at the Master's College, and I was studying what the reformers were teaching on Matthew 24 and 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5. I saw that the amillennialists and the historic premillennialists had no problem saying the coming of the Lord in Matthew 24 was the second coming event. And all the parallels between Matthew 24 and 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5, Paul is just following Jesus' teaching in the Olivet Discourse. They're the same event. Well, but I like the partial preterists. They were right that the coming of the Lord, the apocalyptic language, and all these events would be fulfilled in Jesus' generation. Then I began to think, well, wait a second. If A is equal to B, A is Matthew 24, B is 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5. If A is equal to B, but A was fulfilled in AD 70, then B was fulfilled in AD 70. If apocalyptic language is being used in Matthew 24 with the trumpet and all this, then why isn't 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5? And then added with Gary DeMar and James Jordan's admission that the gathering of the elect in Matthew 24 is a spiritual resurrection of the dead ones, then wonder why 1 Thessalonians 4 isn't that. Okay? These are the issues that they can't deal with, so they just have to say with some kind of authoritarian nonsense, oh, these full preterists, they can't quote these guys because they're not full preterists. Well, you never build your case by quoting your own theologians. You build your case by building it with the admissions of your opponents and trying to solve a problem. That's the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard of in my life. But there it was for all to see. Are partial and full preterists using logical fallacies when in 2 Thessalonians 2:2 and 2 Timothy 2:17 and 18, we read of those who were teaching that the day of the Lord had already been fulfilled. The coming of the Lord in judgment. It had already been fulfilled. And then in Timothy, we learn that Hymenaeus and Philetus were teaching that the resurrection had already taken place. Are we using a logical fallacy? Well, let's read what Keith Matheson says of 2 Thessalonians 2:2. Now remember, he's a partial preterist, so he believes that there was a yet future to them coming of the Lord that was spiritual in AD 70. So he writes this: if the coming of Christ, our gathering to him, and the day of the Lord in this chapter refer to the second advent, the rapture, and the bodily resurrection of the dead, then it is necessary. It's necessary to explain Paul's method of proving that these things had not occurred. If this chapter is referring to the second advent, the rapture, and the bodily resurrection of the dead, the proof that these things had not yet happened would have been far more simple and obvious. The entire argument of 2 Thessalonians 2 could have been reduced to a single question: are you still here? Now, Jeremiah and his little buddy Trey said, oh man, full preterism, it's the easiest heresy to refute. All you have to do is roll down your window and look outside. And Trey's a partial preterist, so he'd have to agree with what Keith Matheson is saying here. All right? So the question is here, is Matheson using a logical fallacy here? If he is, Jeremiah, Sam, will you guys please get on the phone, call Ligonier Ministries, call RTS, and say, wait a second, your president is using logical fallacies. He cannot argue this way at all. If it's so easy to refute that the coming of the Lord has already happened and the resurrection's already happened by just saying, look around, why didn't Paul not use this argument not once, but twice? He didn't use that futurist argument, just look around, in Thessalonians on the day of the Lord or the resurrection. So we can just repurpose Matheson's argument in Timothy with Hymenaeus and Philetus and say this: if Paul's doctrine of the resurrection of the dead was biological and physical, then it is necessary to explain Paul's method of proving that this resurrection event had not occurred. The proof that the resurrection event had not yet happened would have been far more simple and obvious. The entire argument of 2 Timothy 2 could have been reduced to a single question. Are the dead still in their tombs? Are you still here? If it's good for our Orthodox partial preterists to argue this way, and it is not a logical fallacy, we can use the same argument. But let's address Jeremiah's big thing. He thinks he's got something special here. He thinks, well, these full preterists, they're not consistent. They need to damn us to hell, all right? Because, Hymenaeus and Philetus, they were unbelievers. Because of their error on the timing, they were damnable heretics. So those full preterists, they have to damn us to hell. They shouldn't be trying to be cultish and being buddy-buddy with us. Well, I don't know if you've read this, Jeremiah, but did you realize that these guys were Judaizers? If you look at the context and what they were teaching about other things, they were Judaizers. They were teaching salvation by works. They were teaching you had to be circumcised. Their error on the timing of the resurrection is connected to their theology of a works-based system of salvation. Not only that, but if I remember right, and I may be wrong, but if I remember right, I think they were challenging Paul's authority as well. Do futurists teach these things? Well, if you're a futurist and you believe in works-based salvation, and you believe that, you have to be circumcised or you have to perform these works to be saved, and you're a futurist, well, maybe you're not a Christian. All right? But the issue of the timing error is not enough to condemn someone to hell. So there is no argument there for you. I'm sorry. Moving on. Number 5, Ecclesiastes 3:11. Well, we moved the goalposts a little bit here. First, we were told by Sam, very animated at the time, I remember. I thought he was going to get his hand stuck in maybe his, 6-inch, vampire killing cross or something, in his little goofy hat that he had on. But in the first video, we were told this. Oh, Sam's talking. I've searched everywhere. I've searched all, as many commentaries and German journals and this, that, and the other. And I haven't found anyone that teaches anything other than that this passage is referring to the end of world history. Now, I've already done a video on this, so I'm not going to go back into it. But it took me 2 minutes to find a translation that says it's referring to the end of their lives. There's a time to be born, there's a time to die. Verse 1. And verse 12, it talks about their lives again. This is talking about living our lives from the beginning of our life to the end of our life under the sun, our experiences in life, all right? And then, we will be judged. Doesn't say at the end of world history. So we move the goalpost here from no one can find anything other than what I say, right? Because I'm a scholar and I can read this in Hebrew. We move the goalpost from that to, I'm so happy that they found that translation because that's just a horrible translation. One. The second thing was erect a straw man and then beat it down and show how scholarly you are. And 2, Jeremiah kind of jumped on this train. It's like Mike didn't even know that their lives is not in the original Hebrew. Did I ever say it was? No, I didn't. I'm very aware that translators function as interpreters many, many times. It's a translation. So we have literal translations, we have interlinears, and we have translations. We all know this. So to say something I didn't say, and then to beat it down to make you look smart only makes you look like an idiot. Revelation chapter 10, verse 6. Everyone knows the Greek word is chronos. Chronos. So Sam pointing this out wasn't a big wow, all right? And we know in the Greek that there are different words for delay. That didn't prove anything. I like this. He says, it's chronos. It's like just looking at your watch. I like that. I like that. So if I were to talk to you and I were to look at my watch and I said, your time is up, or you're out of time, or you have no more time. This is equivalent to John saying time is no more. It's a specific kind of chronological time that is no more. But it's a little awkward to say time is no more, so the translators correctly look at the context, look at the other imminence passages, and translate it, there will be no more delay. So there's a chronological period of time that was running out, that was going to be no more for the wicked to repent, and no more time for the vindication of the martyrs to take place that they were waiting for. So this is a really good commentary. It's 2 sets. Peter Leithart, he's a partial preterist. Oh my gosh, he's not a full preterist. I can't read from him. You know, it's a 2-volume set, okay? I like what he says. Contemporary commentators are quick to deny that the passage refers to the cessation of time per se, and most English translators render the clause, there will be no more delay, taking Revelation 10:6 as a statement about the eternal duration of time is acontextual. In other words, it's not it's what Sam's trying to do, and he says it's not contextual, and I like that. The question raised by Revelation and the text is not whether we will be temporal eternally, but whether the sealed secrets will ever be unsealed. In other words, he's not dealing with some philosophical crappy argument that Sam and Clark think that they've come up with, all right? This issue is not the final state, but the fulfillment of God's commitments within history. That line of interpretation certainly captures the import of the angel's oath, which Beale connects with Daniel 12, verse 7, which is, again, I've challenged Jeremiah so many times on Daniel 12 and Revelation 11, I'm spinning my head. The guy just does not know how to answer even one biblical question. It's very sad. When the 6th seal is opened, the world begins to come crashing down, but the end is held off because another angel from the sunrise instructs the angels at the corners of the land to hold back the 144,000 are sealed on the forehead. Revelation 7, verses 1 through 3. That another angel is the same angel of Jesus we meet in chapter 10. It makes for a neat symmetry. The same ascending angel who is responsible for the first delay descends from heaven to announce the end of the delay. In chapter 6, the initiation of final judgment comes in response to the prayers of the martyrs from the altar, and the time interval is the time between their prayer and their vindication. Beale. He refers to Beale. Now the angel who took the prayers of the martyrs to heaven descended to assure them that the interval is nearly done. And then you go over to page 409. John uses both, and of course he puts it in Greek. I believe that's kairos, and he lists where they are. And then he says chronos in chapter 2, chapter 6, chapter 10, and chapter 20. What might we infer from this usage? We begin with chronos. Prior to 10:6, the word is used twice. First, to describe the time that Jezebel has been given for repentance, chapter 2, verses 21. And second, with reference to the little time that the martyrs will have to wait for their vindication. Going down, John is not concerned with durability as such, but with the specific duration given to the wicked to repent or harden, the duration during which the martyrs wait for justice to be done. That duration is coming to an end. In other words, that time is no more. That time is running out. That's all it's saying. So there's no argument here to be, oh, it's chronos, it's not kairos. That's not an argument. So look, they didn't deal with the context. Lightheart is dealing with the context. It's the same angel, the angel that he believes is Christ, made a delay in chapter 7, and he shows up again in chapter 10. There's no more delay. The time of fulfillment is here. There's no more time for the wicked to repent, and there's no more time for the righteous to be waiting for their vindication, because it's coming. It's so close. It's right now. This is not difficult. This is not difficult. But Sam latches on to anything he thinks can refute full preterism. That's his whole gig. That's his whole marketing scam. I'm a full preterist. I was Mr. Everything. I was Mr. Wonderful and full preterism. They all loved me. I was their scholar. Now you have to listen to me. I'm the futurist dancing bear. Look at me. Okay? And so he latches on to anything he thinks can refute full preterism. This was another nothing burger. Nothing burger. Ecclesiastes 1:4. Again, one generation comes, another generation goes, but the world abides forever. Sam spent, I don't know how much time stammering and stuttering and trying to look at the Hebrew and read it. And then Jeremiah interrupts him. So now I know why Mike Sullivan won't debate you. After all of this stammering and stuttering, trying to do the Hebrew, basically just said what the English says. A generation comes, a generation goes. All right? A generation is temporal. That lasts for 40 years. And then another one comes. Contrasted with the world, which is sure, which does not change, which lasts forever. All right? Now, they say that's the new creation. I don't see that saying that there. They kind of reading that in there. But that was a nothing burger. Again, okay, Gordon Clark and Van Til and the Westminster Confession of Faith. Okay, so Sam wants you to believe because he knows somebody important and he took notes on some meeting that everything's okay with the whole Van Til and the Gordon Clark and epistemology and how we come to knowledge and God's knowledge and man's knowledge, and everything's hunky-dory. Interesting, I was listening to a professor at Westminster Seminary saying that actually Gordon Clark's rationalism got worse as time went on after the complaint that was filed against him. Not only that, but the professor says that the students of Gordon Clark are worse than Gordon Clark was. And I see that a lot in Sam. Sam is very desperate to find anything he thinks can refute full preterism. So he's very biased, and he doesn't mind if he uses philosophy to try and do it. All right, so he's conflating kind of what he. And some people have come to me and said, look, I'm a big fan of Gordon Clark. I read Gordon Clark all the time. Now, I personally don't. But they come to me and they say, hey, look, we know a lot about Gordon Clark. And Sam, I think, is misrepresenting Gordon Clark on this. Okay, so whatever your position is on Gordon Clark, the whole Van Til thing, knock yourself out. But it was very clear that there was a complaint filed against him by Van Til and other Reformed guys that were saying, he's saying a lot of stuff. And when they had a complaint about the whole infinity thing, they were saying, this guy's not using scripture. And we don't like that. And that's kind of the big complaint I see with Sam a lot, is he's always trying to form these philosophical, logical things that aren't even logical, and they're horrible philosophy and logic. But anyway, so he's conflating this with the Confession, Westminster Confession, was it chapter 3, I think, 1. So just off the top of my head, before I went to any of my commentaries, on the Westminster Confession or commentaries on the London Baptist 1699 Confession, I just did a simple search. What did I type in? I typed in Westminster Confession of Faith. Are there errors? Does there need to be revision or corrections or whatever? Interestingly enough, the section that Sam quotes from pops up. And this individual says, in this section, that angels and men thus predestined and foreordained are particularly and unchangeably designed, and their number is so certain and definite that it cannot be either increased or diminished. Now that's the big thing for Sam. Say, look, the number of the elect, it's set, it can't be taken away from, and it can't be added to. Okay, let me make a distinction here. It's one thing for a Reformed futurist to say that the number of the elect is certain because they believe a faulty eschatology. They actually go to texts and say, well, this is teaching the end of world history. And then you got another Reform guy, oh, no, really, this is Israel's world, Israel's Old Covenant age. Okay, that's one thing. That's an apple, okay? It's another thing for an orange to come in here, Sam, and say, well, this means that I can interject Gordon Clark's philosophy, and that this is really what the framers of the confession were talking about. See, the framers knew that God couldn't know an increasing kingdom in which people are continually get saved. God couldn't know that. That would put God's omniscience completely in jeopardy. And that's not even the point of this, if you read the confession and the context, okay? This guy says, one advocate of revision proposes that this whole section be struck out of the standards because it is not a scriptural form of expression, it is misleading. What is the meaning of this section? Increased or diminished? By whom? What is the ellipsis intended to be supplied by the framers of the statement? Plainly, they meant that the number of the elect and non-elect cannot be increased or diminished by angels and men spoken of in connection, that is, by any finite power. Neither the human will nor the angelic can determine the number of God's elect and non-elect, because this depends wholly upon the counsel of his own will, quote unquote. He says this, I like this. Of course, the assembly did not mean to say that God could not have made the number of his elect larger or smaller, but larger, if, quote, the counsel of his own will had so determined. Probably no advocate of revision understands the confession to teach this. Well said. So what does it mean when the confession says may not be increased? Is it because God just cannot know this? And that God's omniscience is somehow jeopardized here? That wasn't even remotely in their mind. They're dealing with Arminianism. They're dealing with open theists that were teaching to make man's will perfectly free, God has to surrender certain attributes, such as his omniscience. Thus, man's will can be free. And so God can't know his elect even by name, really, let alone know who they're going to be until they make that choice. So I would think that the elect could just go on and on and on and on because God doesn't really know. You see what I'm saying? They're dealing with Arminianism. They're dealing with open theism. They're not dealing with Sam's philosophical mumble-jumbo garbage. And it says that the number may not decrease. What's he mean by that? It means typical Calvinism 101. You can't lose your salvation. Salvation is up to God and his will, his counsel, his power. It cannot be increased by the will of man without God knowing and determining it, and it cannot be decreased because God has saved such and such, and he has, by his power and his will, we continue to be saved. All right? It's eternal life. It's not temporal life. So that is what this section is referring to. It's got nothing to do with Sam's mumbo jumbo. He's conflating the two, but they're apples and they're oranges. All right? We can deal with the error of the confession and the futurist believing that the New Testament teaches the end of world history. We can look at all those texts. And the confession itself says it may contain error. So let's go through those passages and see if they teach the end of world history or if they're referring to the end of Israel's world and the end of Israel's Old Covenant age. And of course, Sam knows what would happen there. Isaiah 65:17 and following. How are we doing on time? Is this thing still running? I hope so. We were accused of over-spiritualizing in the very beginning of their critique of us, of full preterism. But now, once we get into Isaiah 65, we are told that this is poetic language, and therefore we're being too literal, while they're being the correct spiritual interpreters of this. Sam was a little confusing on this. He was trying to say that this new heaven and new earth is kind of, Israel coming back from the exile. That's kind of a James Jordan partial preterist type deal. But it was kind of typological, kind of covenant language. But ultimately, this is referring to the eternal state, heaven. I like what Mr. Gentry has to say about this amillennial interpretation. Contrary to amillennialism, there is no substantial evidence for identifying Isaiah 65:17 and following with the perfect state or the eternal state, which is what Sam's trying to say. We must consider Isaiah's specific statements. He speaks of glorious, elevated conditions, so he realizes, and we realize, that he's using poetic language. It's poetic language of which period? We would say of the New Covenant age, of the gospel era, that the new heavens, new earth is not the eternal state. And Gentry will be agreeing with us. Sam is saying it's poetic language ultimately of the eternal state. So anyway, let's listen to how Gentry. We must consider Isaiah's specific statements. He speaks of glorious elevated conditions, but conditions still continuous with the present. We see this in the experiences of birth, aging, death, time, sin, and curse. No more shall be infant suckling from there. Live but a few days, nor an old man who has not fulfilled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. Isaiah 65:20. This is pre-consummational, for sinners will not be in the post-resurrection perfect state. All right, so let's go on. He says, J. Adams defends the amillennial interpretation of these elements with a rhetorical question. How else can perfection be described in words which have imperfect objects and concepts as reference? And I love Gentry's rebuttal. The answer is easily. Surely it is not impossible to think of post-resurrection perfection without mentioning 6 elements of temporal imperfection in the same sentence. Could Isaiah not say that in the eternal, consummate new heavens, no infants will be born, no one will age, no sin will exist, and the cursed forever ceases? What is so difficult with stating matters in this way? Touche. Touche. Oh, and over here he says, the new heavens and the new earth here, and many places elsewhere, Revelation 21. I would say 2 Peter 3, but he's scared to death to surrender 2 Peter 3. Refer to the new covenant era. It characterizes the system-wide transformation that occurs with the coming and spread of the gospel. All right, and this is taken from Gentry's book, He Shall Have Dominion, Postmillennial Eschatology, pages 368 and 369. So Gentry's saying, yeah, it's poetic language. Everybody understands it's poetic language. It's poetic language of what, though? Not of the eternal state, but of things that take place in real life. Today, in the new heaven and new earth, in the new covenant, the spiritual kingdom. That's what this poetic language is talking about. Oh, we go on. Oh my goodness, there was so much stuff. Daniel 12:7. Jeremiah wanted Sam, quote, speak directly, Sam, to Daniel 12:7. Now this is, Daniel's getting angelic revelation as to when the tribulation and the resurrection and the end of Daniel 12:1 through 4 is going to be. And the angel says, it's gonna be when 3.5 years takes place, when the power of the holy people is completely shattered. Well, Sam didn't specifically deal with it. He tried to say it had something to do with Antiochus Epiphanes, but Don and I will deal a little bit more with that because I wanted to keep this video a little bit brief. But there was no... Now, Jeremiah knows I've pressed him so much on Daniel 12 and Revelation 11. In Revelation 11, you have this 3.5 years that Daniel prophesied. Daniel was told, seal up the vision of this 3.5 years when it comes. And this judgment upon the city, this shattering of the the power of the holy people. All right, when this judgment takes place, it's far off from you, Daniel. Seal up the vision. And we're told by Reformed folks, well, the book of Revelation picks up where Daniel left off. Revelation 22:10. Do not seal up the vision, John, for the time is at hand. Well, is that chronological nearness? I mean, far off is chronological, right? Literal, far. So why is at hand something that's always near? So bad. Sam is so bad on that. And Jeremiah is just a backslapper. Oh, Sam, oh, you're so awesome. Oh, man, it's kind of horrible to watch. So because I've dealt so much with Jeremiah on Daniel 12 and Revelation 11, in other words, how John is interpreting Daniel 12:7, all Jeremiah had to do was say, deal specifically with their arguments. I mean, they're saying that this 3.5 years is a period roughly between AD 67 to 70 or 66 to 70, all right? And it's the same judgment upon the same city for the same 3.5 years, and John is applying it to Rome, right? Treading down the city for this 3.5 years. Jeremiah doesn't want to do that because Revelation 11 is the heart and soul of his argument for Revelation being written before AD 70. So this is why Jeremiah is not asking Sam these questions. Just so you know. Just some cleanup material here. I never said that I prayed to kill David Chilton. I've asked for a quote for that. Sam has not provided one. I think he provided an anonymous source on some group list somewhere. The guy didn't even have the spiritual balls to have his name, attached to the quote. I've never prayed to kill David Chilton. I would have loved for David Chilton to continue on teaching full preterism, that the 1 second coming took place in AD 70. He says that I've prayed to kill David Chilton and Sam. Nope. Very clear. I've talked about this. I've given my testimony on this so many times, it's not even funny. I prayed. Okay, here's the deal. I confronted David Chilton when I was a student at the Master's College because I saw that he didn't divide Matthew 24 into two comings. Very subtle in his commentary on the book of Revelation, the days of vengeance. and it was referring to the coming of Christ as a thief. He took that as AD 70. So it was like, and I was doing the parallels between Matthew 24 and 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5, where Christ comes as a thief, and 1 Thessalonians 5, and I was like, wow, this is the same thing. And if he says Matthew 24 isn't divided, then 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5 was fulfilled in AD 70. So I come to him, I talk to him about it. He just smiles at me. So he says, you need to read a book. I said, well, what book? He says, James Stewart Russell's book, The Parousia. So I eventually get the book. I get all excited because it's like, man, this guy believes what I believe. I'm not alone. No Church of Christ person ever told me this. I was studying all Reformed guys. All right, that blows Jeremiah, his scare tactics, all to crap. But, he doesn't want to talk about it. So I eventually write him a letter. Many months go by, but I just remember him smiling. So I was like, this guy knows the truth, but he's not teaching it. So I write him a letter. I was really kind. I was like, dude, this is true. There's only one second coming in the New Testament. It was fulfilled imminently in AD 70. And he wrote me back a letter, and he was very angry. And he was just like, well, I don't need the Holy Spirit anymore, Mike, because I've got you in my life. And I just want you to know that your view is never going to amount to anything. At best, it's going to be a footnote in one of my books. And the church, the post-millennial church, is going to crush your heresy into oblivion. So I wrote him back and I said, you know what? God judge between us. All right? I believe you know the truth. I believe you're suppressing the truth. And that's why you're so insecure and you're so mad right now. And I said, I'm going to be praying that the Lord chasten you, because Hebrews tells us that if we're in sin, God's the faithful Father and he will discipline us. I said, I'm praying that the Lord will discipline you and do whatever it takes to get your attention so that you will repent from this and begin teaching the whole counsel of God's word. Boom. Didn't hear back from him. Didn't get a follow-up letter to that. A year or over a year takes place because I'm going to Reformed Baptist Church, Sacramento at this point. I had dropped out of the Master's College because I got tired of all the 4-point Calvinist dispensationalists running around telling me I was a hyper Calvinist because I believed in the 5 points of Calvinism at that point. And I got tired of spending $13,000 a year to convince my professors that they were totally wrong in their dispensationalism. So it didn't make any sense. I dropped out. I went to Emmanuel Baptist, Pastor Rick Baucham's church. Very cultish in their whole elder authority, and that's a whole another topic, okay? But went there, and then I was there for quite a while, and then I moved to Pennsylvania for about 6 months, and then I moved back to Sacramento. So it was over a year, maybe into 2 years, and I'm living downtown Sacramento, two blocks from the hospital, and I get a call from somebody saying, hey, man, did you know that Chilton had a heart attack and he's in a hospital? And I said, where's the hospital? And they told me. I said, that's 2 blocks from me. So I get our worship team, and we get in there, and I said, I don't know if this guy remembers who I am. I said, let's just go in there and worship songs and worship. And he loved it. He loved it. And he wanted to have lunch. So we had lunch afterwards, after he got out of the hospital. On the way into the restaurant, he told me, he said, Mike, I just want you to know, I did know that the second coming, that there's only one coming of Christ, and it was fulfilled in AD 70. And I said, well, I appreciate that. Praise God. So, and then, he went on. I didn't really have any contact with him after that. And he went on to, speak at some conferences and give his public testimony and why he believed that. Great. I didn't pray that God killed the guy. I can't stand Sam Frost. I cannot stand him. He's a man-pleasing, dancing bear, man-pleasing, man-fearing wimp. I can't stand him. But I don't pray that God kills him. I pray that the same thing for him. I pray that the Lord will chasten him, that the Lord will do whatever it takes to get a hold of him. And I don't even know if David Chilton's stroke had anything to do with my prayer. I just prayed, Lord, do whatever it takes to get this guy's attention And whatever happens in his life, and when you're getting his attention, make a connection between this. Now, did David Chilton make a connection between his stroke and his compromise? I don't know. We didn't talk about that. I'm not God. I don't know these things. Okay? So I really wish that Sam would stop saying, that I prayed to kill, because he's just trying to discredit me. All right? He's just like, oh my gosh, that guy's crazy, right? So he's pathetic. Another thing he said at the end of the video, he says, oh, well, Mike, Mike was saying, I thought he was saying that I was teaching that someday we'll all walk around naked, but his mic was so bad and the audio was so bad. Sam, get a mic, dude, or check your audio before you do these things. I had to listen to it 3 times, and he was right. He was saying that I was saying that his view necessitated this. Now, this is what Sam was teaching that I was talking about. Sam was trying to say, he was trying to marry and conflate full preterism with postmillennialism. So he was going to Isaiah 65 and the long ages there. He was saying that we, one day, will live to be 900 years old. And we're like, what are you talking about, Sam? He's like, yeah. Well, I mean, and he was getting this from postmillennialism, where there's this progressive glorification of the creation, and then before the golden age, before Christ comes the third time, all right? But he wasn't holding to the coming part. He was just saying, oh, well, this is going to take place physically. We're all going to be living to be 900 years old. I said, well, number one, that's not full preterism, Sam. I mean, you're interpreting that with a hyper-literalism that would make a dispensationalist blush. Number 2, so you're wrong on the nature of fulfillment. That's not full preterism. And number 2, you're wrong on the timing. If this is a prophecy that is yet to be fulfilled, then Jesus was wrong when he said, all Old Testament prophecy would be fulfilled in his generation. So we confronted him on it, and at first he repented and he said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then later on he doubled down and went right back into it, and then he got his Gordon Clark philosophy thing, and he thought he was set. He was out the back door faster than you could say anything. So I was pressing him on this, and I said, well, wait a second. You're saying that we're all going to go back towards Genesis, what was happening in Genesis. We're going to live to be 900 years old. So I said, so how far are you going to take this hermeneutic? Because it's talking about, the wolf and the lamb laying down, the lion's going to eat straw and not the ox, and so forth. I said, so do you believe that and the child's going to play with deadly snakes, poisonous snakes? I said, so at what point are we going to start throwing our kids out there to these poisonous snakes to see if this is kind of sort of starting to be fulfilled? Does this also mean that carnivores are going to be changing their anatomy to not eat meat? He says, well, lion taming is kind of an example of where we're going with this. Me and David Green just laughed. We just mocked him, and you should mock him. And we just mocked him. He couldn't stand it. Because, when you compromise like that, you make an ass of yourself, and he was clearly doing that. So I said, so I was just making fun of him, and I said, so at what point are we not only going to live to be 900 years old and throwing our kids to the poison snakes and hope, and maybe the lions won't attack us anymore? Are we going to be living to be 900 years old, experiencing these things and be naked too? I mean, where does this thing end and begin? And so, I was just poking fun of him. That's what that was about. But Sam just, he wants to try and discredit me. So, I'm praying to kill everybody and all this. So anyway, Don and I will get into the rest of some of this stuff tomorrow night, Lord willing, if he gets all of his stuff, his Wi-Fi fixed and all that. All right, guys, Lord bless. This went longer than I wanted to, but hey, it wasn't a 2-hour video or a 4-hour video, and I got a lot accomplished. So take care.